Welcome, Poggers, to another episode of the PogState. I'm ATLUS, joined by Valdes, Wolf, and Chronicler, and we're here to break down some playoffs. We have had a few playoffs already, a few best of fives under our belt, and there are two more remaining. The most important ones, deciding our next team going to Worlds. Of course, Gen G have already qualified. We've got another telecom war, and possibly a different matchup in the finals, or exactly the same matchup in the finals.
Fourth time in a row.
Yeah. And it's always like, this is actually something really interesting that I saw. Fion on Fire tweeted this. It's always the four mid laners up against each other. Chovy, Showmaker, Faker, or BDD. And it's been no one else for so many splits now. It's actually kind of nutty. But the telecom war, gentlemen. Wolf, do you want to start us off? How do you think it's going to go? Paint us a picture.
The upcoming telecom war, the one we just had.
Well, maybe we should review what has happened first. So let's just we can start with that. Do we really want to go through the round one matches?
No.
Yes.
They were not
We have
good.
to talk about Barrel.
That is
No.
true.
Because he's making Worlds, so, I mean, even though they lost 0-3 to Home Life Esports, and it was a pretty big disaster, I think that was...
You
was that
mean
me and Ox who cast that one? Or me and you?
No, that was me. I casted both Homa series.
Yeah.
But wait, no.
It was great.
It wasn't Beryl failing in the playoffs. It was him making sure he had as much prep time for the gauntlet as
exactly.
possible.
Yeah. You don't have to waste time. I mean, you're already in Gauntlet, so you're just trying to make sure, okay,
Kafka was coming out.
we
Yeah,
get
no,
out.
exactly.
You got to get through your Honkai Star Rail phase, and then you get to prepare and be ready. So DRX will be in the first round up against DK, right,
Yeah.
in the Worlds playoffs, or Worlds qualifier. So,
Let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Home Life Esports, they looked good against DRX, who were not trying because they're just waiting for the
They,
qualifier.
yeah.
I was just going to say that the tier list season, was maybe we overstayed that a little bit. Maybe that didn't come true in the playoffs, except for this matchup, where it definitely came true.
No, it did.
It
It's
did.
just that T1 moved up a tier.
That's the only thing, because Homa Life did not take a single game of players better than them.
Yeah.
And they also did not drop a single game against players worse.
Yeah, I mean, for Hanwha and for DRX especially, the tier list, the playoffs definitely came true. I think for the T1 series, obviously that was a bit different from our expectations. But, yeah, Hanwha, they also didn't really learn anything from their first series. I think we've seen a common theme of our playoffs thus far, that the teams that improved based on why they lost the previous match seem to look much better. T1 also just coming in very well prepared, knew exactly what their weaknesses were. And Hanwha, they just didn't really figure out what their weaknesses were. Even though they 3-0 DRX, they didn't look like the greatest team while doing it. And then they just looked like the same team against a better team in KT today.
We have to add the caveat of the fact that Grizzly played his very first best of five in his life in the LCK instead of ever having a chance to do it in Challenger. The guy comes up from Academy. He was in Academy in spring this year. So,
For the first week of the summer as well.
yeah, and so he did great in regular season, and I think with the pressure off, that was fine. But moving into playoffs, he's way too green, and they didn't really have anything that they could do about it. And he was the pretty obvious weakling.
Yeah, he had a bandage around his wrist the whole time. I hope he's okay.
he injured
You never
his
know.
wrist
It's
all
just like real sports, right? Especially in hockey, at least, players will just play through injuries. They're like, well, it's playoffs, we have to play, right? And hockey players are insane like that. But I would assume that pro gamers would do that as well. Even if they're hurting, they're like, well, let me get through the playoffs, and I'll just, get some
Put some
treatment
ice on
after.
it.
Yeah, So I have no idea how he's feeling. I don't want to make any assumptions, but I hope that's not hurting him.
Yeah, I think I don't know, was it you and me, Max? Or we saw him walk past after a game as well. I think this was after the first series. And he was already complaining about it. And then for the next two, he actually had it wrapped up. I don't think it would have been the difference maker. I think that he was always going to... If there was a expected weak link, he was always going to be it. And he was. But, against Peanut, against Cuz, against... I think really good junglers. I was more disappointed with Life and Kingen than I was with Grizzly, because I think Grizzly really underperforming and having a bad playoffs makes sense. I think Life and Kingen really not living up to the expectations they've set for themselves was more disappointing to me.
I think that Gen.G are really good at mentally booming opponents that they are better than. And I think we saw a lot of that, before against Hama Life Esports. And then KT are also pretty good at it. I should just say Lahens is pretty good at it.
He is
so both Gen.G and KT they just got ahead. And we talked about the tier list season. Like, Gen.G and KT are way above them. So I didn't really expect Hama Life Esports to do much after we saw the Gen.G loss, to be honest.
Yeah, I want to kind of clarify what we mean when we say Grizzlies first best of 5, because best of 5s, like a 5-game series, that can be very long, very taxing. Like, your champion pool is going to be tested. What kind of pick are we going to do this time? Is my champion pool wide enough to play this longer series? That's not really what we're talking about here, because they got absolutely stomped, and it was not even a 5-game series. It was barely a 3-game series. We're really talking about him playing in his first elimination match, where it's not regular season. This matchup matters. If you lose this one, you don't walk home and go, oh, what can we improve for next time? It's that's it. That's my last game, potentially, for the rest of the year. I mean, obviously, he's going to have to play the gauntlet as well, and I assume he'll be playing in that one. I don't think they're going to get a new jungle player for that tournament. I mean, they might, but I don't think so. They technically could, but it's this is the end of my year basically for the LCK, and I think that's really what we mean when we say it's his first best of 5. It's the real first match where you're getting eliminated, because the aspects of longer
highest pressure, right?
Exactly, because the aspects of a best of 5 that we talk about all the time, where you do have to prepare really hard and your champion pool is tested, that's not really what this was about. I don't think in this case.
No, we talk about best of 5s for Grizzly in the same way that we talk about best of 5s for aiming. Where just sometimes you get into a situation where there's a potential 5 games to play and you forget how to play League of Legends. And that does sometimes happen to aiming. It has happened a whole lot of times in the past. And I think it was a big narrative moving into today's match. Just a note for everyone, we're filming this after KT handily dispatched of Hama Life Esports. In the series against T1, that was a big talking point, because it did look like he was a little bit invisible.
Yeah, before we move on to round 2, do we want to... I don't really want to, but we have to talk about D+.
DK were there.
No, we don't, do we?
Yeah, I think for a little bit.
I think
because we're going
we
to
have to talk about it because they're in
Yeah.
World's Gauntlet, and if they played like they did in this one against T1, they will not be there for very long.
They're going to lose to TRX. That's where...
100%.
If they play like that, which I don't
think they will.
I don't think they will. I memes aside, I'm looking across from me here most notably. I think that D+ should be able to at least win the first series.
I don't know what you're talking about. There's no memes. There's no memes.
It's not a meme.
It's a
That's
fact.
the thing. It's going to happen.
It is the written truth.
Feral isn't it?
But I think that this also was a really interesting series, in that obviously D+ looked really bad, but also it made T1 look worse than I think the next 2 series showed us that they are right now.
That's a good point.
In that, I think the expectations for T1 after that series were still pretty low.
Yeah.
But then, after the way they played against both KT and Gen.G, it feels like they've at the very least made a very sizable effort in
They're
jumping.
in the same tier now.
Yeah, exactly. Jumping back to the tier where they used to be, tier 1.
And the thing about that D+ series for me is it just felt like the whole team, collectively as 5, just really dropped the ball in general.
Oh yeah,
And then the T1 D+ series, I felt like there wasn't a specific moment where everyone's see Canyon, he's finally exposed. It was just the whole roster just looked like they were a weaker team than
was
T1
everyone.
on the day.
I think
that's a problem, because that's not something you just solve by going, let's change up the drafts and we'll figure this out. The shot calling is very poor. The shot calling is very poor. I'm really glad they played Kellen, because I really felt strongly they needed to do that in this series. It didn't ultimately matter. Not that he had specifically a bad game. I'm not blaming anybody. Like I said, I think the whole team just can't be on the same page. Those team fight setups, the objectives were just really haphazard practically. I mean, we know this team is capable more. I've seen it. We've all seen it. All 4 of us have seen it.
No one is jailed. We had Def dying in lane. We had Kana giving up random kills. We had
No one's really
Weird
calling
pathing
for
from
Thanatos anymore, because it's
what are you
should we
gonna
bring
do?
the whole squad up? But we can't do that. It's not just one guy. So
I also don't know whether, going back to that series with what we know now, I think, the reason why T1 beat KT was because of Zeus. And I think that that's also partially why D Plus lost as well, because they lost complete control of the top side of the map in every single game. I think that we didn't realize how on Zeus would be for these playoffs. Like, the guy has been performing out of control good, and weirdly enough for D Plus, Canna has been one of their most consistent players.
He was actually,
Which feels weird to say, but he has.
Renekton's in the meta.
True.
That's why.
Aatrox
I
is back
figured it
as
out,
well,
yeah.
and so he was a bit of a 2-trick back in the day, so that certainly works out for him. But I think that Canna got completely stomped over and over again, but the team wasn't able to support him at all. Like, Canyon just doesn't really play for topside. He plays for mid and sometimes for bot lane and himself the majority of the time. And so Canna is often left on an island, and if Canna's left on an island with Zeus, he dies over and over again. Like, I think that's the same for most top laners, right?
Yeah, because Keen also got
Bopped.
completely bopped by him as well. And
Yeah.
Doran kind of did, but it was different because Peanut played a lot more, I think, towards the top side and keeping him safe.
Yeah.
In a 1v1. Yeah, I think Zeus together with BDD have been the really big individual standouts. Like Zeus, Peanut, BDD, I think, are like those guys are playing
I would agree.
really well.
D Plus, I don't know what's going to happen over the course of these few weeks before the Worlds qualifier, but I just don't think it's solvable. Like, I don't think the issues can be solved. Like, this is probably just it for this roster. Like, see what happens next
Kind
year.
of feels like what happened to T1 at the beginning of summer, where it was like,
Yeah.
we kind of know what they're capable of, but they're just everybody's dropping the ball. We don't really know what the big issue is. It seems pretty mental. And then we found out about Faker's issue, and then he got subbed out, and it got even worse. But there was like a couple of weeks there where we're just like, man, this team just doesn't look good. And that's kind of what's going on with DK. Like, Showmaker, I think he's had some off weeks in the past bunch of years, but this has been like maybe his worst couple of weeks. We saw like week 9, and then this match against T1, I guess. It's been really rough. I don't know what's going on with him.
It's been tough. Yeah,
And he actually
to watch.
didn't even necessarily look like the worst one, because he was against Faker, right, who was also still recovering.
Yeah, he
and
did fine.
in lane, it
Yeah.
was okay.
Yeah, he did fine in lane. Like, in week 9, though, he did not do
No.
fine in lane.
And like seeing, like I've said this so many times, but I have to say it again. Seeing his Jace just get completely dominated
That
in
was the
lane
game
phase,
that
like
you think about, yeah.
yeah, that's it. Just comes back to my mind, and I'm like, oh my god, that's not the guy that we're talking about in like contention.
not
for
very
best mid
Dejan.
laner. No,
Yeah,
it's not Dejan at all.
And I do think that this is a D plus roster where if they end up making a like T1 did, kind of a miraculous recovery. Of course, T1 had actually Faker coming back in, and then plus the
Yeah.
work they put
Need a
in.
catalyst.
Yeah, you need a catalyst. I could see it. I could see them still end up being 4th seed if they play to their level and overthrow Hanwha down the line, who I think will be the one fighting for 4th. I do think that T1 or KT at this point seem much more likely as a 3rd seed, whoever ends up losing that battle. Because we know the ceiling of this team, but they haven't really given us a reason to believe that they can hit that ceiling, I think, in like the entirety of summer.
Yeah.
Really.
If they also agree with like my sentiment that this is like just not fixable, like they've clearly identified the shot calling is a problem. They put Bible in, didn't work. They pulled him out. They like put it back in again. I wonder if D Plus actually sit down as like the management and the coaching staff sit down and go, maybe it's time to play Lucid, like, and give him a shot and like start scrimming with him every day. Because you got to be doing that like right now if you think that's going to be the answer. Put Lucid in and be like, all right, we're going to scrim with him every day. We're going to see if maybe he can actually change the
Just
early
Lucid?
game.
I was gonna say like
Like,
Pool
maybe
Bay and
Pool Bay
Thanatos
too.
probably.
I mean, I don't know if pull base is
Just because
is
of
the
mid-jungle
answer.
synergy.
I also think Canyon or Kana is too like pivotal to this roster right now. It used to be like Showmaker Canyon, like it's always gonna work, but now I'm like it's that's definitely not working, and that's all you have to rely on. So to me, I think Lucid is the piece I would put in. But regardless of who they put in, like just you've got to start scrimming them now and like seeing if it's gonna work. Like right now, you can't suddenly decide or like put Lucid in for one game because that's not gonna solve it. Like,
do you know what you do? I know exactly what you do. You just plug Deft into the challenger roster. That's what you do. Because then you don't need to work on synergy, because Deft just fits. And that challenger roster has already
pull
got...
up- pull up
all-
Oh,
everyone
okay. You
else.
mean
Yeah,
you mean
literally-
basically leave Def and pull everyone else.
Yes.
off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes
Yeah, yeah.
sense.
So
I was
you
like
were
really
saying send
confused at
Def
first.
down and bring up Rahel.
I was like,
Oh,
what?
no. The exact opposite.
Yeah.
But like that's what you'd get.
Yeah.
I'm saying like you plug Deft into the challenger roster and use that.
in LCK.
I mean, it
Yeah.
it wouldn't be completely without precedent because T1, don't forget, debuted Guma in the 2020 Worlds Gauntlet. and it didn't end up working out. But I think that might be an angle. Otherwise, yeah, it's so hard without anything that like procs the honeymoon period to come back from how rough this team has looked.
I think
the
that
honeymoon period
Yeah.
buff.
Yeah, I mean
like
it's a real
gamer
thing,
term.
right? Like
Yeah. No,
I mean
it's just
we've seen it
funny.
with so many teams and like how much difference an individual player can make. But
We've also seen like that when there's less pressure, like on KT's Challengers team when they were played against Live Sandbox, like they were super excited to play that series. They did extremely well. They played very well. You put players who have nothing to lose into situations like this, or relatively comparatively nothing to lose, like they often overperform. And I feel like if you're going to take a risk, and D+ has shown us with Bible that they're willing to do that, maybe they got to start scrimming now. Maybe they are. But if they just put that same normal D+ roster, and I've got no hope because it's just
which is what I think.
But the issue is it's with the new format, right? They have just the 1 best-of-5, and if they lose, they're out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They have to win two
They have
in
to
a
win
row.
2, but they have to win that first one too. So either you do it like right from the get-go, or
Yeah,
you
yeah,
might
for
just lose
sure.
that
Yeah, that's
first
what I
one.
mean. Like for the whole qualifier, like, and you got to be screaming them now and make the decision. Like we are doing this. Not
I
like
mean,
we're
honestly-
thinking about it. Like it's like we're doing it.
the problem is it's a moot point because their season is done because they're against Beryl, and Beryl is
All
winning
right.
well.
I knew it
so
was,
like,
I knew it was coming.
yeah,
I thought about doing it, but
yeah,
just
that's-
let Max do it this time.
Yeah, thanks, Valdes.
So KTT1
KTT1
round 1, or it's round 2, but it's round 1 between the two teams.
Yeah. So this is the first time that they met, and it went exactly the same way as the last time in spring,
It was dope.
and it was
think
a,
it was
it
the
was
best
a, it was a good
series.
series outside of some of the work putting the champions together on the Rift,
Yeah, but I do
which
think
left a little bit to be desired.
it was the best best of 5. I think Genji T1 was a little worse with how a lot of the games played out than
I mean,
KTT1.
KTT1 was also very one-sided.
Almost every game was super
Yeah,
one-sided.
actually, you're right. So only game 5.
I think
Actually,
Genji
I take it
T1
back.
series was better.
Never mind.
I think Genji T1 was a little bit more interesting.
Outside of the Vayne incident.
I mean,
Yeah.
that was interesting. I like seeing
We had
Vayne
an
get
Ezreal
completely
incident
destroyed.
as well. Like imagine playing that champ.
The Ezreal, the Ezreal incident. Yeah.
And it's
Ezreal
actually
Galio.
it's kind of funny because the only time I think that picking Vayne is okay is into Ezreal. So if you had a mind controlled aiming to pick Ezreal again, just pick the Vayne into it, and then you're okay.
I really felt like KT looked really exposed, and if we go back to our last PogState episode where we were kind of talking about how like when's KT going to disappoint us, and I felt like if they just went straight to the finals through the upper bracket, like they were going to lose the finals 100% to the team that like improved.
Yeah.
And then they lost this series, came back today, albeit Hanwha a very much weaker team, like I think we all agree, but I think KT in this series, Aiming's champion pool got pinched really hard. He looked very out of sorts, and like they clearly looked like they were shocked that they were going to be losing this, even though some people have come out and said like, oh, T1 was stomping them in scrims. I literally don't care about that at all. Personally, I don't value that information at all. I think
Scrimbucks!
they seemed pretty
Scrimbucks.
That got me Comic Sans.
yeah.
That's where the Scrimbucks will lead.
So I personally felt like T1 had a good read on KT. KT, I think, got a little bit mental boomed in the series and weren't playing at their best either. And then they came back with really nice draft adaptations in the follow-up series today against Hanwha at the time of recording. And, like, all of those games that were one-sided felt like they were winnable for KT if they just made less mistakes in the mid-game. And that's what we saw from KT when they lost to Genji last time around in the lower bracket finals in spring. It's like, you were almost there, but you couldn't quite do it, and there was some aiming issues. But T1 looked really good, and it's crazy because I think T1 is so on point with how they're playing right now, even with bad drafts a lot of the time, and even with Faker looking like he's half of who he can be. You know what I mean? Like, Faker is not having good laning phases. Their drafts are sometimes pigeonholed into making it work for him, and
Decision-making
still...
has been pretty bad. Like personally for him.
yeah, in lane.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
That's
like...
probably because he's commanding.
But
the
he's
rest of his
he's
peons.
greeting super hard for like plates and
much
getting away
micro.
with it sometimes. Like I actually feel like Faker has been outside of his hands like pretty on point with like some of the calls he's making insides. Like he's just been left to his own devices to get like inner turrets and stuff like that. But T1 showing up in a big way, I think shocked KT. But weirdly enough, I think if you're a KT fan, like this is the series that you needed if you're gonna actually lift a trophy.
Yeah,
That's kind of my takeaway from this one.
Chronicler. You look stoic.
I have a really hard time rating what this means because we don't know what's going to happen in the upcoming series. My gut feeling is that the core issues that KT faced in this series, I don't think are going to be fixed when it comes to the next two. And I could see them beat T1.
Wait, against T1? What core issues?
The fact that if you have a AD carry that has a deep enough champion pool, which I think Viper does, but Humble Life drafts I think have always been very basic. I think
Let's
T1
just pinch Lahens. That should work, right?
Yeah. Which
Well, he did
mind control him to play Galio, yeah.
Well, I mean that
I'm talking about today, but yes.
No, I know, I agree with you. But I think that specifically the fact that you will be able, if you're willing to go deep enough in your own champion pool, which I think Guma, for all his faults, is relatively willing to do.
Oh yeah, you can play Vayne.
Well, obviously that was a disaster, but like things like Samira and Neela are still on the cards, which I think helps a lot.
Aiming debuted Neela. He's actually a pretty good Neela.
Yeah, Draven as
but
well.
Draven also
that
adds.
terrifies me.
But
Guma, yes.
Guma, yes.
Yes.
Well, that's my point. I do think that aiming's effective champion pool is worse, and I also think that if aiming is the guy that KT is relying on, and the draft gets warped that way, I think T1 always wins. The bigger issue, though, is that I think that Zeus is, with a large margin at the moment, the best top laner. And I think that today's series, Keen was fine, but I don't really think it was about him. If Keen ends up getting put on tanks and Zeus gets to play carries, I think that will destabilize the point, topside to the point where KT lose so much. Because they have not played with a losing topside for the entirety of the split. Don't get me wrong, like I think this matchup is a 3-2 one way or another. I think this will be extremely close. In the lower bracket final. But to me, even with all their faults, I think that specifically T1 really match up well. I think it's a triangle. I think that T1 match up really well into KT. I think that KT actually have a winning matchup against Genji, and then I think that Genji do well into T1.
I think that
I kind of like I have that vibe as well.
And I like it's really all these three teams I can see win realistically depending on like form of the day. Like I think it really comes down to like, is a player feeling good? Like, did they sleep well? Are we just, does Doran like in the last finals, right, get like the first 3 plays go his way and he gets a boost of confidence and he smurfs the first games before they. I think it's like small stuff like that that's going to be the big difference maker. Because I think that all these teams are good enough to win.
I think that T1 are getting away with it at the moment. That's what I'm feeling. I feel like because of this massive resurgence that Zeus has had and Keria has had especially, has led to people incorrectly working out where they're supposed to put their power. Because I think that like T1 loses a lot of their strength if Zeus falls behind. And we haven't really seen too much of an example of that. I think KT absolutely have the ability to play towards topside. Put Keen on something that can just win lane and then park Cuz there. Because I don't think that Faker can hold his lane against BDD. I think BDD is the best performing player in playoffs at the moment, and I don't think that it's even close. And I think that the bottom lane, if left to their own devices, is the best way for aiming to ever perform. Because he needs to have as little spotlight on him as possible, and then everything's okay. If there's disasters going on elsewhere, aiming's generally all right.
So the thing that makes me feel differently to that is what happened today in the Hanwha series, where actually like aiming and Lahens just crushed, and aiming got super far ahead, and they just put Keen on tank duty, and like Keen was like totally fine with that and was absorbing pressure, and Kingen did kind of make some errors up there on the top side, especially that third game on the Aatrox was really pushing his advantages way too far, let's say. But like the fact that they feel confident to put Keen on tanks and then just play through bot, and aiming and Lahens are such an insane duo in terms of their early kills and how much power they have been able to gain there. I actually think aiming has this reputation for being like, I'm only the late game and Lahens is always not here. And so like that's how it is. And I think most of the time it has been that way. But I think they have proven, even in this recent series, that they can do it the opposite way. And Keen's on tanks, and then like he gets 2 kills early, Aiming gets 2 kills with Lahens early, and then it's like, well, now it's all about aiming, and the game is super lopsided, and Keen is going to tank it up and have really good engages. His Ornn game today was really good. Yeah. Like he was like pushed out of the pit, and he's still like long range engaging with his Ornn horn in that dragon fight. That was what inspired me to think that KT learned a lot from that T1 series and just said, like, okay, like, let's see what happens if we just play more through bot and, like, have lanes actually kind of stay in the lane and do stuff.
What about the other side of the coin, though? Like, the fact that it's now Cuz on carries that's been the result of Keem being on tanks. I think that, like, unlocking Cuz to, like, just dominate the jungle and elsewhere. Yes, he was against Grizzly today, which is easy to take advantage of, but I also think that Owner is a huge weak point for T1 they can play through. Valdes, you've been somewhat quiet.
Yeah. I just think that KT weren't really ready for T1 in the second round match, and they got caught off guard in the second and third games. Like, they stomped game one, and I think they were like, oh, we're just so much better than these guys. And then T1 really stepped it up. They proved, okay, we are a tier 1 team, but it was already a little bit too late. And I think, like Wolf said, like, KT had some time to, reconfigure, kind of, change up their style a little bit. But I also think that Hama Life Esports didn't challenge them at all. So I don't really take much from the series at all. I'm just like, you stumped Hama Life Esports. They're not really a match for you. Like,
Doesn't mean anything.
T1's much better. Yeah. So, like, I don't gain confidence by playing well with, like, Lahens and, like, stomping the bottom lane, even though it is Viper in life. I just feel like it was a huge team diff, and, like, there wasn't really much to garner from it. That's how I personally feel, and I think that the next time T1 and KT match up, KT should have the advantage, I would say. I think that I think I'm kind of with Max on this. Like, I think there's just too many things that you can take advantage of, and KT will be ready this time.
ATLUS was mentioning Cuz just a moment ago as well, like with him on carry junglers. I feel like that was the style that KT did best on in spring.
Yeah.
We had that meta where it was like, you're either weak side Zeri on bottom or you're like the hard, strong side Lucian, and then there's like the level 3 prio with Elise, and we sometimes saw even with Sejuani with Cuz, Poppy, obviously, and Viego, where he's like making dives happen. They were even making it work on red side and like going in there with the red buff and stealing that away when teams were mostly just doing it on blue side when they had that prio, pushing into blue buff. But like, KT seems really good at that, actually, and I think you're really onto something on that. I think that KT kind of remembered that they have this in their wheelhouse in this series today against Hanwha Life, and Owner does look very out of sorts. Like, that was the biggest weakness I think T1 showed in that Genji series is, like, they're winning games despite Owner a lot of the time, because he looked super uncomfortable on some of those picks. The Sejuani game really coming to mind, obviously.
Yeah, for me, I think I have actually still have no idea what I'm going to end up predicting for that. The mid jungle, I think, is extremely heavily in favor of KT, obviously, and the only thing that I would be worried about is that something we saw today as well was did he play Viego in all 3 games or 2? I forgot what the final.
He played Kha'Zix.
Kha'Zix, there you go,
yeah.
in the third one, yeah. But the Viego Sejuani, I think he is like hard carrying on. With Owner's form, the draft in that way might not matter too much, but I do really heavily favor the both side lanes for T1. I do think Guma and Keria, now that Keria is back online, provided they don't pick Braum or Vayne, but like the Braum, the Vayne I thought is mostly funny because it was obviously bad, but also that they didn't really do that before. But the Braum they have actually been going to the point where we were joking. I think this was on the desk, like when they banned the Braum. The enemy team banned Braum, and we were like,
why?
Why would
not
you
just
do
take
that?
the
Yeah,
win?
yeah, because as good as Keria is, I think the team does not function with him on not engage for obvious reasons, particularly because Owner's playing so poorly, right? So if your jungler is not engaging, like, do you want it to just be Faker? Like, I think Faker should be held back from engaging because I think it's one of his biggest weaknesses at the moment, unlike Azir.
Well, I actually think that, like, if the rest of his team was performing, then him
Well, he
taking
wouldn't.
up that mantle is fine.
Well, then it would be, yeah. But I think right now, Keria on engage definitely, and I think, again, when it comes to lane performance, Guma and Keria have really stepped it up. Keria is obviously the biggest difference because he was basically non-existent and now has been kind of smurfing it up. And then top lane as well, but if mid-jungle, if they don't get good matchups for that, and I think that KT do have a decent amount of picks like for mid-jungle, particularly with how well BDD has been playing, where they can get an edge, I think the rest of the map will just fall apart in the fact that side lanes are in T1's favor.
Just take away Jax, take away Xayah, and maybe like a Rella or an Alistair, and then like maybe Prio pick that for your side.
You ban Maokai Xayah and you win. I think Maokai Xayah and
Maokai's,
you win.
yeah.
Here's a third
Maokai's
pick.
just strong. I mean, it depends on what side you're on, but like I think those two picks are like you got to take them away, and I think T1 will lose a lot of power.
I think the third pick that I think teams should ban against T1 that no one seems willing to do is just ban Azir. Like, literally just ban Azir. It's
Or
like
just
all
play
fakers
Xerath
playing.
into it.
Yeah, no, I don't think you have to ban Azir.
I don't think
Particularly
you
if
have
you're-
to, but I think they lose a lot.
especially if
from
you're
not being able to play.
especially if you're KT, because BDD has 3 really good counter picks into it.
Yeah, I think that like if you pick Azir into BDD,
classic.
then you just get wrecked.
There's no winning. It's
classic.
it's horrible. You can't pick it into him because he will have a lot of great counter picks, and you can't pick it or let him pick it because he's obviously really, really good at it. And with his form right now, I the more I talk about it, the more I'm like, I think it'll be a KT like 3-2, 3-1.
I might even go 3-1.
Because I
That's
think
what I'm
the-
considering right now. Yeah.
I'm 3-0.
I'm not a 3-0 again.
Yeah, because the main,
Max is just getting
as
excited.
mentioned, I think the side lanes.
I am not.
The,
I
the
think they'll
side
lose,
lanes
but
are.
I'm going to predict it.
Oh.
KT's going
Right.
to lose, but I'm going to predict they'll win
Oh,
3-0.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not.
Anyway,
Side lanes in favor of T1, mid jungle heavily in favor of KT, and if T1 can find a way, I think that they are a lot more clutch than what KT have shown, and then I think that they can take this series. But otherwise, I think that BDD and Cuz are just a little bit. Way too
I
good.
think we all kind of unanimously agree and did agree last time we thought about the telecom war that when we guessed that KT would pick T1 and they did. Like,
Yeah.
I think we all kind of have the same feeling about this series, except we're like have a little bit more faith in T1. But you think on paper, if KT actually play well, they're the better team. And I think we're kind of like, okay, they beat Hanwha recently. Like when then we remember in our brains, like no, actually KT is really good when they're playing at their best. And like for me, I just feel like T1 out clutched them and aiming looked a little bit uncomfortable. And they didn't really have a backup plan in that last series. But the more we talk about this, I do kind of lean towards KT just being the stronger team again and taking it this time and going to the finals they couldn't get last time. And, you know, I feel like the drafting for T1, I feel like I'm kind of alone in this, but I really didn't like their drafting in the Gen G series. They won despite it, in my opinion. And
I was with you on that one.
I
I'm worried
agree,
about
but I
that.
understood it. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
I understood why T1 picked all the champions that they did, but then I also didn't like it. You know, because it's like Zeus going back to his Gnar, and that's great. And they've got like Zyra
Just kind of
Khan.
felt like they were giving up a lot. You know, like
Yeah,
sometimes
yeah,
a lot
yeah.
of times you were like, you know, like T1's draft is like all right, but then like you look at the other side, Genji got like everything they ever wanted. So it was like, you know,
It's
their
like-
bad is their draft itself, like the 5 champions isn't bad, but like the 10 champion and all the bans and stuff kind of was like, I think you can,
It's the humble
navigate this
situation
well
where you have a good draft
better.
on paper, and then you look at your opponents, you're like,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like when you look at the drafts of Gen G yesterday, you're like, I know exactly which patch this is. Like if you just took at those, and then you look at like T1's draft, you're like, what year is this? Like, is this like 2022 spring or something? You know, like you look at the
Yeah.
T1 drafts and you're like trying to figure out like, what exactly
It's just a bit
happened
wonky.
here?
It's like, I
But-
wonder if Hooney's going to flash at level 3 with this Gnar, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, wait, it's not 2017. Okay, never mind.
But at the end of the day, I mean, they were able to execute on it, and you know, they ended up playing through it, and you know, oftentimes we were like, oh, I don't think this is going to work, but then they made it work. So credit to them.
The one time we said-
they used the comfort to their advantage.
Yeah, that's the thing.
In the Vayne game, we were like, this doesn't look like it's going to work, but we're not going to say that because we've been wrong every time. And then we didn't say it, and then it didn't
then
work
they
as
got
we
crushed,
expected. We
yeah.
just were silent about that one. Yeah, I truly believe if they didn't pick that Vayne, if they actually did something standard in that draft, like they might
3-1.
actually be in the finals, like straight up, like
Oh,
3-1.
100%,
It's done. Like
I would agree.
I opened all the websites then with like .co.kr and looked at what the Korean community thought about the Vayne pick, and they were even angrier about it than the Western fans. I was like,
I mean,
all right,
it
well,
was
I think
2-1.
everybody's on the same
It was
page.
2-1.
It was
They were
2-1
Yeah.
T1.
Yeah.
They were 2 games in a row, right?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
they had like they could have picked Sivir. Like we were calling for the Sivir a lot, and then they just picked Vayne. We're like, what is going on?
I think
Like they could have won that game. It
I don't
wasn't
know.
just
I-
because of the pick, but you know.
Yeah, I think
Coulda
the,
helped.
the pick was definitely bad, but I do think that game was very, like, it was very lopsided on the top half of the map as well. And the Vayne didn't really solve anything. And if it was a Sivir, I don't think it would have substantially changed. If
That
they
being said,
if they changed the Brom though, then I'm if they changed the entire
Yeah, it's like it
Brom
wasn't
lane,
just the Vayne; it was the Vayne Brom lane
that's
where I'm like,
yeah. Because
Yeah.
then I'll be, if there was like, I don't know, don't remember the exact, there's like Carrier Nautilus,
I think
like
could have done like Sivir Leona.
Yeah,
'Cause
then
there were a bunch of
so then-
support picks that were pinched, but
Yeah.
like it was potential.
then
to pick something else.
then it would be with it. But I also
Sivakama for the movement speed.
no, that's not a champion.
The Mantra Inspire
Yeah, it's
and
not a
On the
champion.
Hunt combo. I actually think
very
that if
fast.
someone like picked Vayne in my game though, like I'd go 0-5, like because I'm so tilted that someone picked Vayne in my game, you know. So
You're
like,
busy vein spotting.
yeah, you have to be looking out, and then it's very hard to concentrate on what you're doing. But yeah, I think that was egregious. But I also think that I don't know, you end up in that situation in a draft, then things have definitely gone very
Just don't
wrong.
brom. Don't do it, kids.
I just think Faker has pulled so many resources in the draft because he just can't play hard to execute champions very well right now because
Yeah,
he's
the
still
first pick
relatively
is
injured.
Azir
Yeah.
in that one game.
That's why I do wonder, like,
And
if
then
they
they
ban
won that
Azir,
game.
what does T1 do? Like, what did they do in the draft? Like, it becomes a really interesting question. Like, can he play Talia right now? Like, no.
can play
Is he going to play
Annie.
Yone?
Yoni?
Yoner.
I just don't think you ever have to ban Sejuani into T1 right now because Owner looks pretty uncomfortable, and I don't think Faker can play Yone right now. I mean, maybe he'll prove me wrong, and I'd love to see it, but I just don't see it happening.
They also really like picking like half a permafrost activator with Sejuani as well. Just
Gnar.
tilts me out of the planet. Makes me
Jeez.
very upset.
I think if you're
Yeah.
I think
Those
if
are the
you're
takes, right?
Yeah,
if
yeah.
you're a really good Sejuani, if like Cuz does that, I'd actually be okay with it because I think that as much as the value can lay in her permafrost, like she's also just like level 4 Sejuani is actually really strong, right? You can actually invade like if you're playing into like a Maokai or something, if you're really good with your ultimates, but if you're not any of that, which right now is the form Owner is in, then
But cooldowns are pretty low, so you're kind of just like always flailing
yeah,
and
I mean,
permafrosting.
champion is
autoing,
just
and, yeah, it's
is
just a
just strong, and also
good champ.
as is often the case, we have seemingly remembered this playoffs that you can counter Zaya by picking, you know, Zareth or any form of poke. Maybe we can remember that Sejuani has counters as well, so we don't have to permaban her anymore.
Just a Trundle
just
enjoyer,
keep-
aren't we? We
Trundle
just
is
really
I
want to
just
get
keep-
there.
I keep. I mean, it doesn't even have to be Trundle. There's a bunch of other picks as well where you can just, you know, put her down early and
So
Fine.
mid-jungle.
Genji also banned LeBlanc
this.
against Zeka every game, and so I thought like Genji had this feel. I know Zeka is like pretty decent LeBlanc player, but like Chovy's way better at LeBlanc than he is at the moment. I would say like massively better. And they kept banning LeBlanc, so in game one I was like, we'll see. Like, are they gonna pick up the LeBlanc here? Like, do they think this is actually good? No, absolutely not. It was like never gonna happen. I was like, oh, you don't have to ban this against Faker. You don't think you can play it right now? Maybe Chovy's gonna show some cool stuff like we saw from them in week 9. Nope, no LeBlanc. That's just dead. And I'm very happy about that. But I was wondering like
Yeah.
if that was gonna be
Also,
a thing.
Nico's kind of gone
Yeah.
as well.
Well,
I think
it's
it
just with Noct.
depends.
It actually is a specific like team fighting counter pick now, as opposed to just winning everything all of the time.
I think it's actually a
good.
really interesting pick now.
Yeah,
Because like now
agree.
finally, instead of like just randomly pop lossing and never getting punished for it like ever, you actually see like you need to have a bit of like finesse and timing and like hit those ultimates. Otherwise, you're just gonna fall behind and die.
So we haven't really talked that much about Genji yet, who I think are just gonna win again.
Do we just
think it's
all
happening.
expect KT to win? Because we kind of like roundaboutedly talked a lot
Yeah.
about lower finals, right? Through like what we've seen so far out of T1 at least.
Well,
yeah,
like-
I expect that right now.
I expect it to be. I do think it'll be very close because I think that on paper KT, I think it should like 3-1, but I think in practice that's not what will happen because I think that they will make the same mistakes that they made, not just because they're not expecting T1 to be good,
3-2.
but because I think this team struggles in high pressure situations.
Yeah, this is
but
also
I-
going to be on its Daejeon.
It
I was
is
gonna
true.
say
So
like it
the pressure is
It
on.
is in fact Daejeon.
Yeah.
And let's not forget that KT, which was a very different season, was also favored last time around when they faced Genji. And then they got 3-1 as
spring.
well. Yeah.
Why were they favored in spring again?
We really liked their like bot pushes with Cuz. Like I think we were all kind
Oh,
of like, oh
and-
yeah, Cuz is really good right now. He's going to be better than Peanut because Peanut was also having a shaky end of the
He
season.
was.
in
And
his
Pays
playoffs.
hadn't been
general, yeah.
tested on a big stage
Also
yet.
that, yeah.
And then that was irrelevant entirely.
Yeah.
Because
He
he's
was, like, the
Pays and he's a
best.
Because
robot.
he's
yeah.
a robot,
And then he gets MVP. Yeah.
But I think that we did a... Yeah, we talked about it extensively, right? I would lean towards KT, but I think it's closer than... Because you're leaning 3-1, 3-1.
Maybe I'll go 3-2.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure what I'll ultimately decide, but
Yeah.
Gonna be
I
one
think
of those.
it is really like what you mentioned earlier about how it's like did they eat well that day might be like the decider
Yeah,
because
no.
a lot of the ways that you have to quantify the series because of how crazy our playoffs have been and how much it has been on the day form that you just don't know until we get there, and it's like really hard to actually make an accurate prediction
Maybe
here.
it's
I don't
like-
think there's a correct prediction.
Yeah, maybe it's like
I
the
agree.
first series that Faker actually is like, I'm back.
Is back.
You
Yeah.
know,
We don't
and
know.
Then all the T1 fans are gonna be like, you guys should have known. Like you weren't talking about like a veteran. What did that one
The
guy
veteran
say?
shot
Yeah.
caller.
You didn't.
The
The
clutch-
ATLUS don't factor
the
in
clutch
the
factor?
veteran
The
The
shot
veteran
calling.
factor,
the
yeah,
veteran
yeah,
factor.
yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. Well, it could happen. It could happen though. Doesn't mean
Veterans
we have
such
to
as
predict
BD
it.
Chovy,
Yeah.
also in this.
Doesn't mean we have to predict it,
I think-
but it might happen.
I think
Just
it's a.
disclaimer, okay? Like,
I think it's really easy. I think it's just a 3-0. I just don't see it being interesting. I think it's just like because KT have made the adjustments, they are not going to get taken by surprise
that also
from a
could
T1
happen.
that like turned things around, and they made the adjustments in draft already. Like, I just think that it's kind of done and dusted, and I think that like the sum of the parts on KT just outweigh that of T1 at the moment by a large enough margin to make the aiming factor not even all that relevant. Unfortunately, that's just where I'm at. I don't know, and I'm very happy to be wrong in
mean,
this
that's-
situation. Like, very happy to be wrong, but I have this like I don't know sinking
So-
feeling in my mind that it's just going to be a 3-zip.
Do you think, because that's I think why the reason why we're leaning towards it being more competitive. Do you think T1 has now made the jump? Because we've been talking about tier list season for the entire.
No,
You don't think so? Okay, so I think
I
that's
think
the
they're
core.
fifth,
I
yeah.
think that's the core difference.
You think they're fifth, like below DK?
where were they on the standings again?
Yeah, fifth.
Yeah, there we go. I think they're the fifth place team from the regular season, and
They
I think
are.
that like
Yeah, no, they are.
you know,
True.
So
and they were that before like Faker left. Like, and
here's
D
a
plus
question.
have fallen, right? But I think that they've fallen to about the same.
So basically, I think what Max is answering this question almost, but like, do you think the reason why T1 is in the losers finals is because the teams they played against underperformed?
No, I
Or
think
T1
that T1
overperformed?
have been underestimated. Because I think that KT and Gen G just knew that they were better, and KT got caught. Gen G almost got caught, and then they're like, "Oh bloody hell, we got to turn this around."
They
because
picked Vayne lol.
yeah. And
That's
thankfully,
what it all came down
thankfully
to.
that
It's just
happened.
Brom's fault. Yeah.
And
We
I
ate the
think
ball.
I think
he
KT
went
also
in.
like had a horrendous first take on how to draft. Like it was just real bad.
I do kind of feel like T1 are getting a little bit of a narrative buff in a lot of people's minds right now, where it's like, oh, the return, like, is this it? Like, is this T1 actually the best team in the LCK? And I think on paper they're not. But if the other teams don't respect them, or if they also don't show up and play their full potential, then like the winner on the day moves on, you know, and that's
Yeah.
what we've
Yeah.
seen already.
That's absolutely what I think happened for T1 and KT. For Gen G, I think, I guess, similar. Yeah.
Yes.
But the T1 KT one was more obvious. I'm like, KT are just not playing well.
Yeah.
They're not drafting well. Like, I don't know. I didn't like it at all.
For me, the main reason why I do think that T1 has made that jump is because if it's one best of 5 against KT, I could be like, they're overperforming. Like, we know that the players individually are capable of. I do think that Zeus is insanely good and actually gets close to BD. I think BDD is also
But now
my
it's
number
very
one player.
obvious now.
It
You're like,
is.
okay, we know how to
Yeah.
shut him down. Like,
Which-
we know he's going to be the guy to shut down.
Which is fair, but I do think that the fact that they also went 5 games against Gen G, to me, solidifies a bit more that they should be, that it should at least be a close series. But I don't know. I think it's a really cool series. I'm really excited to see what happens.
No, I think it's really interesting. I also think that the PAL like, so there's a test that you can do that's called the Hanwha test with the top 2 teams that we have in the LCK, right? Like, how did Gen G dispatch Hanwha and how did KT dispatch Hanwha? And Gen G, I mean, 3-0. KT 3-0. You know, and so
but,
you're looking
like,
on paper.
Pull out the magnifying glass.
Yeah, you pull out that magnifying glass, and
They're both
actually,
clean
Gen G
3-0s.
is still waiting for game 4 because they're down 2 games. Like,
Yeah.
I actually think that Hummer Life Esports won 2 out of those 3 games, and then they threw them
they
away.
won
The
one.
first game was a pretty insane draft gap for Hanwha. I agree.
Yeah.
Like they didn't play it out well, but it was not like game 3 where it's like, whoa, oopsie daisy,
Yeah, but
I
draft
guess
is
accidentally
draft.
got 3-0.
Yeah.
The
but,
draft
like,
is a
Gen G
draft.
was just a better team, though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Gen G was a better team, but I also
Not in
think
game
that
2,
like,
though.
yeah, that game was like an absolute steal, and so I think that like KT did look stronger against Hummer Life Esports, weirdly enough, and they also looked really stable because like so I think Keen was definitely a weak point against T1, but they were trying to play Cuz on facilitator and Keen more on carries and things like this. That was their mindset. I think Cuz plays way better when he's taking the front foot. I think that suits them in the matchup against T1 so much more. And Keen is really good at navigating team fights if he is on tanks. And I think that he can also try and mitigate Zeus if he can set up Cuz for ganks top lane. And I think that then you just play through your topside win condition. Zeus feels under pressure to make plays, keeps feeding, and then you win the game. And that's not any slight to Zeus, because I think Zeus has to be the one to carry the game.
Yeah, I
because
can see
nobody
that.
else can.
Yeah, so you target him.
So he
and
has to
draft
be
him gameplay.
neutralized.
So
Yeah. And you neutralize him, and then it's donezo.
And I think if we just played devil's advocate for what the finals would look like if T1 went, like we just got an insanely recent data about this matchup specifically, where I think T1 looked outclassed in draft, and then on the Rift it was about better form on the day, like how did each individual player perform. But I think Gen G obviously learned a lot from that series, so I think we can kind of say, okay, if T1 go to the finals, Gen G definitely wins that one, right? I would say, like, I think collectively everybody.
I'm leaning Gen G either way, even if
Yeah.
KT make it.
So
It's weird because Gen G beat T1 3-1 last time, right?
In finals, yeah.
Yeah.
But they lost to them in upper
Oh,
bracket.
T1 beat them 3-1
T1
in
beat
the
them in
upper
upper.
bracket.
Yeah.
And so
And
this
then-
time Gen G are going in with the victory.
And then Gen G 3-1 KT in lower bracket finals, and then 3-1
Yeah.
T1 on the. Which I do still firmly believe that there should be a bigger advantage. I'm just
I
gonna
think
say
going to Daejeon
for
and playing
winner
first
bracket.
is a huge leg up. I
Yeah.
actually think whoever like wins the first match in Daejeon wins the second one.
So
yeah,
you're
just
predicting KT.
always lower bracket.
I'm predicting KT or T1 if they're the ones. that
Whoever
have to
makes
win.
it for
Whoever
lower.
makes it.
I
through.
mean-
I
Who's gonna
think the
3-0.
momentum's too strong.
yeah, so
No,
I also do think though this year, and Chronicle was kind of talking about this earlier about how like these teams match up against each other. This year, KT seems to have had Gen G's number, like in terms of the individual
Yeah.
matchups. Not just obviously there was the loss in the
Unless
lower-
there was the static shiv.
yeah.
So if
There
there's
was
a static
that.
shiv that you can't buy, then we're
in-
screwed as KT.
in lower bracket finals in spring, like they choked, I think, and I think we all really felt like KT was going to win that. But otherwise, like it just seems like it's a really good matchup for these two teams, and we talked about it before as well, like when we were expecting these matchups and stuff like that with like BDD, what BDD does that Chovy doesn't do in team fights, and all of those factors. Just makes me feel like if KT does go, like at this moment in time, we'll see what happens against T1, but at this moment in time, I would massively favor them as well. And I used to be the person who's not a believer at all about like, ooh, they got the extra day in the venue, and so like they're more warmed up, and like that gives them an advantage. Whereas I used to be the guy who's like, no, the other team 100% gets to watch them, prep, rest. That's way better. But I think history has shown us, based on what we saw in the last finals as well, that like getting to adjust to the venue, being able to know like the crowd pressure, et cetera, especially for KT, as Chronicle mentioned, is a team that does sometimes crack under pressure with this roster. I think it would be a huge boon for them if they beat T1 there. Get the revenge. It's like, bam, we just beat the team that dropped us to lower. We fixed our problems. We're familiar with this venue now, the stage setup, et cetera. And then they come in learning so much and then beat Gen G in a matchup they're already pretty favored in historically this year.
I mean, only in summer though, right? Not in spring.
Yeah.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
I think even though, like, I don't remember the exact score lines that happened in the regular season in spring, but I do feel like stylistically, and KT was still ramping up in regular season, right? For like round one, they were like, but round two of
Yeah,
spring, they
yeah,
were
yeah.
like, oh, okay, this team's really good.
I mean, in summer, I definitely think so. But for me, the reason why I'm feeling it's Gen G either way is because the consistency of this team has been, I think, kind of overshadowed by the fact that they're not very flashy in many ways. I don't think they have I think that KT often come out with drafts that have a very strong identity. And I think that the highs of particularly BDD and Keen in the regular split haven't really been hit by anyone on Gen G. But if we look over the course of the entire year, internationals notwithstanding, I think Gen G has been always contesting for the very best. And I think the fact that they are a team that can go down like 3K gold in game 5 of a best of 5 and not be bothered at all and not be budged, to me is so tough to deal with. Because the amount of games where I've seen the core unit of Doran, Peanut, Chovy go like Peanut getting double out CS in the early game and then still have a bigger impact in like the first skirmish in the first team fight, I weigh that really, really heavily.
Yeah, I also think that the bottom lane, Lehens is really good, but I don't have much faith in aiming, to be honest.
But, like-
I don't know. Like, he performed well today against Home Life Esports, but that doesn't count.
Pace had that
Against
Aphelios
T1.
game where he performed well, but he also looked very weak in
Pace
the
was
T1
definitely
series.
Yeah, but I
weaker,
still
but
think
Delight
that
wasn't.
when the pressure comes on and he's in the grand finals, I think he's just going to go robot mode and he's just going
mean-
to play really well. I think he's just going to be more consistent. I'm kind of with Chronicler, like, this is part of why we think Genji is going to win. Like, I also do agree, even if KT do win, I think Genji will win the finals. So,
Are we assuming that Doran plays the same as last finals?
I don't think.
No.
I don't
he
think you
has
can
to.
ever assume that.
No, of course
No.
I
not.
was gonna say, like,
No.
it sounds like you're dangerously
that's-
No, of
assuming
course
that.
not.
That's
I
not
think Keen in
yeah.
playoffs
Like-
has been considerably worse than he has in the regular split. So
One-
I don't know if Doran will be a liability, and I don't think he has been a liability this playoffs. I don't think he's been great, but he doesn't really need to be.
When you go down the list of
Sometimes.
all the matchups, to me, the only matchup that I put like the Genji logo in is jungle. And it's like not even a huge diff. Like I think Peanut's impact. I mean, we all here voted for him first in All Pro. Like so, I think we're all on the same page on this one. But like when I think about Doran versus Keen in a best of 5 right now, I'm gonna assume. I think it's a safer assumption to think that Keen's probably gonna be the better performer of those two players. Mid, same situation. Bottom lane right now, I'm watching Aiming and Lehens be by far the best 2v2 duo in the LCK, like by a huge margin. Like Keria and Guma haven't been able to put up the numbers that they are. And I look at Pays being underperforming, and I'm like, it doesn't feel like there's really an angle here for Genji. I think you can say that what happened last time in the finals was there. Like they upset, they performed really well. The pressure didn't get to them, whereas it did to T1. Absolutely. So like I'm just not ready to predict though that Genji is going to do it just because they did it before.
I mean,
and the pressure
not
is
just
going to be
that.
that.
I think
think
Genji are also
that's-
really opportunistic. Like they find angles to take games back. Like they don't need to like win lane, win game almost ever. And in fact, it feels like if they do win lane, then there's less chance that they're going to win the game. It's really weird.
I also don't think you can look at it like lane by lane in this case.
Yeah,
I do
that's-
agree.
yeah.
Like some of the matchups, like Keen versus Dorian, a very obvious one. BDD versus Chovy, like seems like right now probably.
I mean, I'm not talking
Although
about lane
Chovy
for
is-
BDD either. I mean like in team
like
team
in terms
fight
of
impact.
but also like even Guma and Keria before we realized like Keria's back, like they were 2v2 winning against Saming Lehens, and like I also again like I don't think winning against and like Viper can do whatever he wants against Home Life Esports, or not Viper, but Lehens can do whatever he wants against Home Life Esports because he was just allowed to in
Yeah,
a
Life
team in a
didn't-
team way. Like I think
didn't
that Delight
connect.
did insane against T1, and I think he's going to step up alongside of Pays, and they're not going to be a liability anymore. And like when that happens, I think Genji are just the best team
But
when it
al-
comes to like just across the board.
I mean, it is
consistency.
very close, right? Like any team that is currently in, like I think you could come back in from the future, tell me they'd win, I'd be like I could see the angles depending on performance of the day, depending on
Yeah. Which is why generally we're all kind of on the same page, but like this time it's like
yeah.
it
two
is-
of us
it-
are for Genji, 2 of us for KT, and also it might be T1. Like we also
Yeah.
kind of give them the credit,
Which is
like
kinda
that
cool.
could also
the,
happen.
the way that I'm like
Yeah.
trying to like get to is trying to define who should win and then accepting whatever will happen, right? Like, because I actually don't think that this prediction is going to be correct. Like, I don't know. I feel like it can just go either way, which is the nutty thing about how this series goes, because so much of it comes down to form and like understanding of opposition and like all of these like nuanced
factor.
clutch factor, nuanced factors, and also like, does Cuz get a smite in game 1? Like, is there a specific smite that he gets or doesn't get to put him in the right mindset moving forward through the rest of the series? Like, there's like, I feel like it's one of the series where, like, even the first one, right, the Telecom War, I think so much of this comes down to really, really close things. And it makes it weird that I'm predicting a 3-0 for KT, but I think that whoever gets off on the right foot really gets off strong.
I was literally like coming to the same sort of like mental conclusion as you, like while you were saying that as well, because I feel like if it's a one-sided series, it's because KT won. Like I don't see a world where KT actually clutches it out in game 5 like Silver scrapes and KT shows up and actually wins the series. I don't see that. I see Genji, they're the team that seem to be able to do this. And even though Doran in the past has like messed up lane and then just been boomed for the rest of the series, like he's not really like that anymore. Even if he has a bad game, like he can bounce back pretty well. I feel like for the rest of KT though, especially Cuz and Aiming, like, and Lehens to a certain extent, but Cuz and Aiming, like have a bad game, it's like Can you
Yeah.
bounce back in that series? I don't know.
Yeah, except BDD. BDD is perfect.
He is.
Yeah.
There
Just
is.
want to put it out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, KT are 4.75 players because BDD is 1.25 and
Yeah.
aiming is 0.5. Yeah, like, it's not an equal factor. Whereas Genji are like 1. Like, that's kind of how I feel.
Ooh, but that's 5 versus 4.75.
Yeah,
Oh no.
that's kind of
So Genji's gonna win.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's where I was.
But
going
I
with
do
that.
think lower bracket is OP, and maybe maybe I'll end up predicting, depending on how the lower bracket looks.
Same.
I think
It's
even if KT
if one
win
of them
3-0,
wins.
I'm probably still going Genji.
I mean, I think
is
that
risky,
Genji
but-
to me is such an
I mean, it's
interesting
Daejeon.
team.
It
It is
it's-
Daejeon.
Sorry,
Because
it's not risky.
it's I don't know, rating Genji is so hard because if you look at their performance over the last 2 years, they've been so insane. And I think that swapping out obviously Ruler and Lens for Pace, the light has changed it a little bit, but not really. I do think Pace is worse than Ruler. I think that the light is probably worse when it comes to versatility, but I do think he's been so
Worse
good
at
that
cheerleader as well.
More
Sorry?
clutch.
Worse at
well,
cheerleader.
yeah. I mean, Lens brings what only Lens can bring.
I mean,
right?
Delight's
Which-
kind of bringing a little Lehens energy recently.
Actually,
though, to be
He
honest.
has
Yeah,
actually
yeah,
been
yeah.
getting a bit
He's
hyped.
been-
It's
he
true.
has been-
It's
he has
true.
been
doing
Yeah,
fist
yeah.
pumps and stuff, like, during the
Yeah.
game. Yeah,
he
that's
has
great.
been stepping it up, but I just think that if we look over the last 2 years, the core unit of, and to me it is more about Pina Chovy, but Doran Pina Chovy, because Doran also stuck around, right? Like that core has been always in the top 2 for the last 2 years, which I think is kind of incredible. They didn't really have the ups and downs that I think T1, for example, because T1 have looked incredible, obviously coming back in last year's spring, but then we had even, I think, with ending with them losing last spring, and then at MSI they were kind of up and down, even though they were able to do a better job than Gen.G did. That's international, so I do think that's a little bit of a different equation. But domestically, Gen.G have been so incredibly consistent that I find it hard to imagine that they won't be able to pull it off again. But if KT win, then like I really do hope, and this is nothing against T1. If it would have been T1 making it through the winner, would have been fine. But can we not get T1 Gen.G again and talk like if it would have been
Yeah.
T1, I would have wanted KT to win just so we get a new matchup, because it's been 2 years of this, and then we go to internationals, and then we have to look at it again.
And
True.
it's never been BDD versus Chovy in a final. Like it hasn't been that. That
Yeah.
hasn't been the matchup.
So this is T1 is just the unfortunate victim because they lost against Gen.G. Otherwise, I would have wanted them. You know, I think it would be so cool. And if we get T1 Gen.G, I'm sure it'll be great, and we'll be talking about Faker versus Chovy and the history between these two teams, and about how it is the 9th time that they meet this year.
But this
and
is
they
the
might,
first time when it's Daejeon. Okay.
and they might meet at Worlds as well.
Yeah.
So
Hey, we got 2 other seeds.
I'm
It's fine.
I'm with Chronicle because as a color commentator, you know, I'm a little. It's a bit tired at this point. You know, like it's
Dig up the narrative.
I have like my Gen.G
Brit-
versus T1
dust
playbook
off the
for
notes.
casters. I had like one more tally to the end of like it's the 9th time they met this
Yeah.
year. Like it said 8, and I just like write one more line down.
It's
I'm
like-
I've
like
got my
crossed
story.
out.
I'm
It's like
imagining
nine.
I'll
like
have
the
to
For
prep for this
Dummies
series.
book, and it's got an abacus with 9 beads that have moved over.
another one.
But I also feel like if we go into this this time, it'll be like as we always do for our finals, it's like almost like a unanimous prediction. Like everyone's like, of course Gen.G win this time. The T1 had to go to the lower bracket, looked shaky, drafting was weak, Faker's not at full form, and then maybe T1 just upset, and we're like, oh, okay, I guess here we go. Like it just keeps happening.
Here we go again.
But
yeah.
I'm not. I think everything we're talking about right now for KT Gen.G, for example, is all theoretical. I think we're really gonna have a much larger grasp on how that finals is gonna look after watching the T1 KT series. Like we'll have a lot more information, but
And
Yeah. I don't want to huff the copium until T1 have just like taken it and won the final. Like
Yeah.
I'm not huffing it beforehand. Like cuz it's all intangibles and all this like non-quantifiable stuff, and I'm like, no. Done with that. Just quantify first place in the regular season, KT should win. That
out
other
of
best
here.
of 5
Yeah.
is silly because KT misread the thingy, and I'm just trusting in whatever stuff here I
Agree.
said. You know, and like, I just want to like, I don't know. I couldn't compute the fact that they lost to to T1 in that series, and I'm just ready to go tier list. You know,
Yes,
Just
but
let me back to the tier list.
I do think that, not unlike last year, that we'll have two very clear first seeds, or like for number seed 1 and 2. And then I actually think that 3 this time around, it will end up being whoever loses here. Like T1 or KT, 100% to me is the favorite when we get to the upper bracket of the qualifier, right? Because like obviously
you don't have to face Beryl.
Not until.
yeah. So basically
if you
the
win right away,
loser
you don't,
the
yeah.
loser of this will face Hanwha and then stomp Hanwha.
Yeah.
That's basically what's gonna happen.
Yeah,
And
I think
Hanwha-
we're all in agreement on that.
Yeah.
right? Like I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Hanwha is gonna play against, and I could see Hanwha be the 4th seed.
Against DRX. No! After winning DK. I mean, that could happen.
Guys, think
That
about
could happen.
No, but think about how both DK and Hammer Life Esports have looked.
You do not.
And
you,
DRX
there is an
obviously
angle.
were
you wanna,
not trying.
You want to know the real reason why I don't want to believe? You want to know, Max? You
Why?
want to know?
Because of
it's
me?
not about
'Cause I'm
Beryl. No,
obnoxious?
it's about Croco.
I know.
He didn't make it last year.
It's about Croco.
It's about Croco, man.
It really is.
I mean, everyone knows that it's not
Wolf
about
knew.
Anyone
it's
other than
about
Beryl.
Croco, unfortunately. Yeah.
He's going to play
Oh,
Zach
no.
and win my heart. So it's gonna
He
be
did
God.
play Zach, and it looked
Yeah.
cool.
Now I'm part of the Croco fan club.
Hey, I
By
put the
default.
vote in. Sup, OPGG player of
He
the week.
won it.
too.
He did win
Croco
it. He
did?
did win it.
Yeah.
Yeah, he actually did win it.
Yeah, I think that obviously after last year we get this like DRX's win is so annoying because we're gonna have to do infinite caveats. Like obviously a miracle run can, but I do think the 4th seed will be considerably worse than any 3 of these these 3 teams.
It's like last year. It's happening all over again. Isn't
I mean,
isn't it just beautiful?
Honestly, though, last year, here's the thing. Last year we actually had 2 exciting prospects. Like last year we had Liv Sandbox looking good with Prince, and then you had
And
KT,
KT,
like
yeah.
on their way up and up, and then like
Climb Rascal.
yeah, Vikla, decent, but
just insta locking
Didn't
a
age well.
Zyra that
No.
like didn't
age well for
even
Prince
lose.
either. But at the end of the day, but like
Oh no!
maybe he'll come back. Anyway, I feel like this time we have like not good prospects. Like this time, like we're a little bit concerned about any of these teams going and representing our region.
It's fine. They're gonna be like the 4th seed of LPL is Weibo.
Do you know what
who
the
are
best part
also notoriously flippy. So if it ends up being like, I don't know, it probably ends up being Hanwha,
Who
right?
wins, Weibo or Hama Life Esports?
Do you know what the hilarious part is? We're talking about like 2 teams with 3 world
thoughts.
champions on them, and then 1 with Beryl.
Yeah.
Like they're the teams that we're like, oh, don't know about sending them
No,
to
I
Worlds.
don't
Yeah.
trust. I don't trust Weibo. I don't trust Weibo to win that series as much as I don't trust Hanwha to win it. Maybe no one wins.
What if
Maybe it's the
they
first
draw?
series. Well, maybe it's the first series that ends in a draw.
yeah,
I
maybe
don't
we
know,
don't
man.
know, but it's actually a best of 2 format.
Yeah.
What
They're
if
changing it.
it's best of 4?
What if one of the series at Worlds that Hum was playing in, if they make it there, is played in Daejeon? And then
It's
Viper
Daejeon?
does get to play in
It's
Daejeon.
Daejeon.
But they might actually. No, that's not right.
No,
it's in
it's
Busan.
it's
and
not
then
happening.
Seoul.
Yeah, it's just not happening. Yeah.
But maybe a last minute change of venue.
Because Viper, because it's Daejeon.
Yeah.
We're really
It is,
selling it.
it is in fact Daejeon.
I'm not really
5
too. I'm not really too invested in
nine.
the storylines of the gauntlet just yet because there's just
don't.
like
don't.
The,
That's
the
the
most
best way.
interesting thing to me is if D Plus is actually bold enough to actually change up the roster, do something cool.
Yeah.
I'm like, hopefully something
Or
interesting happens.
just play
or
better. Like imagine if
Yeah.
those players actually
Yeah.
played to
Regain form.
their form.
They've been
you
trying to do that all of round 2 ATLUS.
I
Yeah.
know.
I
It didn't-
kind of feel
didn't
like they've
happen.
been trying to do it
all
all
year.
year.
Yeah, that too. That too.
Yeah.
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 I'm with you on that one, Wolf. That
I wanna
that's
see
fine.
some
Our
changes,
our,
though.
our free seeds will be great.
We always need an on-paper team that doesn't live up to the expectation at all. We need one of them. Like
I mean, KT is going to World, so it's going to be them this time, right?
they can be our
it actually-
2015 LGD.
So,
you know?
so remember how I keep mentioning Genji's domestics? It's because internationally I don't trust this team at all. And by don't trust them, I mean they make
Who
semis.
do we trust the most internationally out of all of our teams?
T1.
T1? Is it
I
just
trust
T1?
T1 up until finals. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's actually kind of the answer.
that's actually
weirdly enough.
that's actually probably what's
Yeah.
gonna.
Basically, what I really want is to have 2 teams that are really strong, so T1 can make it to finals and lose to a Korean team.
It's a Keen team?
Keen team.
Korean
could
team,
be
yeah.
could be Keen team.
Doesn't
could
matter.
be Genji. You know, like
yeah, we'll
Basic-
take it.
or
If KT
DRX.
chokes in the finals, you know, we'll
Basically,
take it.
T1
But if
knocks
you-
out JDG along the
That's
way.
actually-
like that's
Yeah.
the way
If
that
if
it's
you
supposed
if
to
you
go.
asked me, like maybe KT, depending. Like if they end up winning the split, like then I could maybe put my faith in them. But if you ask me, between these 3 teams right now, who do you think has the highest chance of taking out JDG? Who I think should be the clear favorite? I actually think it's T1. It's good day T1.
I personally think it's no team.
On an international. No, we're talking high. No, we're talking highest odds.
Yeah.
I'm saying against
DRX.
what will be the.
It's Barrel, obviously.
It's Barrel.
I think the real
I
star
kinda
of the
just
team
wanna
was
end the
Pear Shake.
episode,
I
like,
think
right
Team
there.
Liquid's winning Worlds. Oh, God.
He was the
Summit and the gang.
like the whole time.
And they're locked, actually. So
Yeah, for at least 4th place.
What about
so they're gonna be there.
Juhan? What if actually it's not about Kroko? What if it's about Juhan?
Because Juhan was actually, but he was there. He's now there supporting
Breaking
Crocker.
Chronicler.
Don't make like I don't want to believe in a team of Croco making it to Worlds. Okay, if it'll happen, I'll be very happy.
Maybe it was Coach Song the whole time.
Yeah, maybe
so
it's
TL's
FlyQuest.
actually.
Whoa.
But what? No.
Didn't Song get picked up by FlyQuest?
Yeah, but they're 9th. They didn't even make playoffs
But
in the
maybe
LCS.
all the other LCS
No, but
teams
maybe he just
get
comes
sick and
to
don't go.
he comes back to Korea to spend time with his family, and he has friends left on DRX, right? So he's hanging out with
What if-
Micro.
what if
so
they
Coach
loan him?
Song's actually there hanging out because his contract's ended now because the
Yeah.
season's
Might
over.
be able to loan a coach. Maybe,
Yeah,
if
right.
it's not ended.
No,
you know?
he's not actually there coaching. He's just there hanging out. You know,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
like if they
He's
want
just
his opinion.
involved.
They could also call up famous support player Pleta to actually play 80 carry instead of Paddock.
Wait, you can also just call up. You can also just call up Doc Dom, who's really good.
And call up Pletter, and then
That would make too
Beryl
much
is
sense. That's not
coaching.
going to happen.
Oh my God! Imagine it's Game 5, and then out of nowhere, you know, we've had Croco win a game, we've had Juwon win a game, and then you know it's Game 5. They bring in the sponge, and then he sponges all.
They do the double, and the frog and sponge both come
Frog
in.
and Sponge.
Oh my god.
Frog and sponge.
Some of the best names ever. But I think we've started to spiral completely out of control.
No.
Just a
thought,
little bit.
Final thought though, like, is this the hardest finals to predict? Like, is this the most divided we've ever been since Mao and I
think
joined?
so.
I think
it
so
is.
too.
Because it was a year of Dom dominance. Then it was very clearly T1 into very clearly Gen G. And then this play, or in spring, obviously we got it wrong, but the general, like it was like the KT series, right? Like that was just a really cool upset.
Yep.
It wasn't that we actually disagreed about who was going to win, which is so cool. Love
Yeah,
that.
I actually think that
it's Daejeon.
It's
It's
Daejeon, you know?
Daejeon.
It's just it's incredibly close. And I honestly think that there's arguments for absolutely every outcome
Yeah.
that's possible.
Love that. That's so cool.
It's Daejeon, it's a world of possibility. You know.
5 goos.
Well,
City
and
of knowledge.
even then, I think they've
That's
actually
my
got
fun
more
city.
goos than that. You know, this is the thing. I think that they're hiding some goos. Like, it's insane.
goos?
I heard I saw a forum post said they had 9.
See, look at this.
Why are they only talking about 5 of them?
Just so you guys know, these are like districts.
We
like
should
in
have
a city.
We
So
should have a It's Daejeon counter.
Ian, get on that. He won't get on that.
He might. I
He
don't know.
won't.
Also
I never
It's
know.
Barrel.
No, not an It's Barrel counter, please.
I mean, we know Beryl's going to Worlds, so I guess that.
If Barrel going to Worlds is the price I have to pay for Croco going to Worlds, I'm willing
Yeah.
to pay.
Do you know what the thing
the
is that's
price.
absolutely true? Beryl is definitely going to Worlds until he can't go to Worlds anymore.
Max has
That's what I will
ingested too
stand
much
by.
beryllium.
He will be in Korea.
At least
probably.
it's inert, so I'm gonna be okay. All right, that will do it for us for this episode of the PogState. I hope you made some sense out of us not being able to make very
last
much
10
sense
minutes.
out of the final and the last 10 minutes. Maybe Ian can cut it down into something that makes sense, but I wouldn't
He
want him to
always
put
does.
himself through that because that's just cruel. But thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoy the finals, and we'll see you again before the end of the year.
It's
Goodbye.
Daejeon.
It's Daejeon. Or it's Beryl.
Daejeon.
We don't know. Bye-bye.
It's Daejeon.
It's Beryl.
Sorry.